Good morning, guys. Joe here from the backwoods. Uh, Wanted to do a talk today about where to find deer in big timber and some other things. People are having trouble locating deer and finding the deer, and I was going to give a few, you know, techniques that I use to find deer. And one of the things I do when I'm in big timber country, it don't matter if it's flat or hilly. You get you know, trees that are, you know, this big around in size. It's just big timber, and when those trees get so tall, it kills the underbrush, and there isn't any understory underneath the whole bedding, and you can still find the bedding. And one thing that I do is when I get out, in big timber, I get on some maps and I'll start looking for power lines. And I know people think, well, that's even more clear, but listen to me. A lot of these power lines, underneath the power lines, you got about anywhere from 4 to 7 feet high of all sorts of underbrush because, the sun can reach the ground there. And a lot of times you'll have small pines growing, and you'll also have sawbriars, uh, bullweed, ragweed. There's going to be all sorts of vegetation, and you can also have cattails growing, under power lines in low lying areas. And it's a real good place, and it gets real thick on these power lines. And I find a lot of bedding on power lines. And not only is it good for bedding, it's also a good food source because when everything else in those, in the big timber it has gone, after a lot of rain, the acorns begin to rot, and there's nothing really left for the deer in those big woods, so they will kind of head toward you know, a power line or a clear cut or something like that. But sometimes you don't always have a big clear cut out in the middle of big timber, and a lot of times I'll start with something like a power line. And I've killed a lot of deer on power lines. One thing you could do if you find a power line that you're able to hunt, maybe on your property or on public land, it doesn't really matter. Uh, get up, don't just dive in on it. Put a tree stand up, get up in a tree, where you can see a long way and just watch that power line for a day or two. Maybe, an observation set on it. Take you some binos. Of course, you want to take, the weapon that you're hunting with because you never know when you're going to take a deer. But most definitely, sit there and look down the power lines and see if you see any deer, coming up and down the power lines or crossing the power lines. Because one thing about a power line is if you got woods on this side and woods on this side, and then you got that clearing, if they want to get to this woods from that woods, they're going to have to cross it. I mean, there's just no way, around it. If you got a street running down the middle of your town, then you want on one side or the other, you got to cross that clearing. And sometimes when you drive by a power line, you may look out and you just see a big clear type of power line. Even those can still be good because you're going to find crossings. Even if the your city or your state goes in and keeps these power lines or maintained to where uh, it isn't as thick, they will still plant a lot of times some type of grass, and they keep those mowed. So it's kind of like having a food plot too, guys. So you're going to find a lot of good stuff around power lines, and a lot of times here in Alabama where I hunt at, our power lines about every 7 or 8 years, the power companies will come out and they will go through with a chainsaw and they'll walk miles and miles and they'll cut down, the tallest stuff that could, get into the lines from a storm. And once they do that, it may not be as good, for a year or two if they try to clear it out, but it will come back. So you're going to be able to find these power lines in any type of timber, uh, especially Midwest, a little bit up, up north. Everybody's going to have power lines. Down south, we've got power lines. I mean, if you got electricity, you're going to have power lines. Uh, So, power lines is an overlooked spot, and there's not a lot of people looking at them because people think, I got to have these big, vast spots of timber to have oaks, and I've got to have all these giant fields full of corn and beans and stuff to take a deer when you don't necessarily have to. Those deer will gravitate toward, acorns and corn and other stuff like that. But if it's real big country and it's wide open, you know, a lot of your deer is going to want to find something a little thicker to get in, bedding on the edge or even traveling the edges. So check out your power lines. It's a very good thing to know about power lines. I'm going to move on to a different subject. That was just one place you can find deer and deer activities around those power lines. You will walk if you walk down a power line, you're gonna find rubs, you're gonna find beds, you're gonna find where they've been eating on sawbriars and all sorts of stuff. So that's gonna be a good draw for deer. Another place I've noticed is when I hunt around water. You guys that hunt around water and you're having big timber butting up against water, a lot of guys don't know where to look for the deer. Once again, a deer is an edge creature and you have to find some sort of edge. Well, what I've noticed on a lake or a open river, I'm not talking about, like a little ditch or something. I'm talking about an actual waterway. Is just get out and follow the edge of the river. Follow the edge of the waterway, the lake, the river, whatever you got. Those deer seem to travel the water. They'll bed on the water. I'm not talking about in the water, but on the river bank, like where you would stand and fish. They'll bed on those river banks, and a lot of times they'll have trails that goes around the actual water, and you will find rubs, scrapes, all sorts of stuff right down the side of the river. So when you're over here in the big timber, a lot of times, they're out there at night hunting acorns and stuff like that. But around the river, seems to get a little thicker, like where the water is, because it gets a little bit of sunlight right there. Because you get over here in the big timber, once again, the sun can't hit the ground, but certain times of day on the river bank, it's going to get sun, and you're going to find briars. You're also going to find, you know, small types of shrubs. You're going to find dewberry, stuff like that. All these plants I'm calling out, you guys can look them up. There'll be all sorts of weed growing around the riverbank, especially in the summertime. Those riverbanks get really woolly. And some of those green plant species, they last, you know, well up into the winter. Like if you have arrowhead or something like that. And also you're going to have cattails, along the riverbank. And I have seen deer get into cattails even here in Alabama. And some spots in southern Alabama and, even up here in North Alabama, we do have gators and stuff. And they don't seem, they probably get a few deer, but it ain't like, they get out and just eat every deer that walks up and takes a drink out of, the river. But you can walk those riverbanks and you're going to find game trails. It's where foxes and raccoons and any other critter that lives on the river, beavers, they'll all travel that riverbank, and that makes a natural trail, and the deer will follow those same trails. So if you set a stand up and you're watching the riverbank, or the lake or a big creek, you may see some raccoons come down the river right on the water. You may see some fox, bobcat, and the deer will travel right down them same trails, and they will bed a lot, right along the water. And one reason is they know that nothing can come from the water and get them. So if you got the water running this way, and over here's the water, and this is the riverside, and this is the bank, a lot of times they'll bed, 25, 30 yards from the river bank. And that's so, they know can't nothing get them there, and they'll bed and, look out into the big timber and like to watch, people like us, like hunters and other predators like coyotes and stuff like that. And deer will sit there and just monitor the situation. And I've noticed a lot of times the deer that I'm not hunting them, they're hunting me. So you got to keep that all in account. If you got some creeks that run through your area, if you got big timber and you do have a small creek, say, 8, 10 foot wide, maybe it's bigger than that, maybe it's 10 yards wide, you're going to find the same stuff going up and down those trails right along the sides of the creek banks on each side. And whenever you seem to find a curve in a creek, that usually creates a good place for deer to cross. Because in that curve is going to be the deepest part of the water, because the water has to hit that curve and it kind of washes out the bank, and it develops, a pool of water that's a lot deeper. And the deer don't want to cross where it's deep, but they'll cross right before it gets to that curve on either side of it. And I've done really good like that on creek crossings. But hunting big timber is just, you got to know where to look for the deer. There's a lot of deer in big timber. A lot of people think you got to hunt something that looks like an absolute jungle to take a deer, and that does help. But you need to know where to find a deer if you're going to hunt big timber. A lot of times that's all we've got. Sometimes it may be a giant stand of pines, and if that runs for 100 acres and a square, I mean, the chances are you're not going to find deer out in the middle of pines that are 30, 40 foot high. There's nothing to eat. And I've noticed here, even in the South, that deer, they don't really eat pine unless they're absolutely starving. And it don't really get cold enough here to where a deer is forced to eat pine. But I have seen a few times in the snow when it was real cold where a deer would bite off a pine branch, and you see where they nibbled on it and stuff like that. But that's just a few things I wanted to talk about in big timber. I wasn't going to do a whole mapping out, map video this time like I have done in the past. I think you guys kind of understand what I'm talking about. Sometimes you're not always going to have a transition area, like where there's a big bedding area and then there's a lot of food, where deer can transition back and forth. Sometimes you're just going to have to set up and catch the deer coming, down these river banks or down a power line or something like that. Uh, Deer are creatures of the edge, and anything that creates any type of edge or a border, they're going to travel it. I have also seen in big timber, if you can find a fence, like a cattle field is off over here, or maybe there's just an old fence from where there used to be some cattle, or maybe the landowner on the private side just has that fence running through there, just, the border, show the land borders. I have seen deer travel fence rows too, just walk down the sides of them. There's all sorts of stuff out there that you can find to help you locate the deer. And the only way you can do it is just get out there and look. But that's a few places you can start to look. I know walking around big timber, sometimes guys find a lot of rubs, they find a lot of scrapes, a lot of that's done at night, guys. And I have took some deer in open timber, but it wasn't the big ones. It wasn't the really nice mature bucks. There's a lot of young deer. They'll walk around in the open timber like that. But the bigger deer seem to travel edges of stuff like it's like we got through talking about like water, the edge of the banks, the creek banks. Ditches are good also. I have seen where deer, if you got like a ditch that's 8 to 10 foot, maybe don't even have to hold water all the time, but they will get down in that ditch and walk it for some reason. I don't know why. Probably something to do with thermal. But you will see deer tracks just running up and down a ditch, and it don't have to necessarily be a very deep ditch. Most of the times, the ones I find, knee deep, just enough to hold mud, and you'll see deer just going up and down these ditches and crossing them. And I think what it is you'll have a high side on one of the ditches, and they like to bed on the top of those ditches because they're a little bit higher in terrain. And it's all comes into wind-based bedding then. But yeah, guys, don't give up if you're hunting big timber. There's a lot out there that you can still find. Uh, but you got to know where to start. And I thought power lines would be, something great for you guys to look at. Uh, I can't sit here and tell you how many deer I've took off power lines. And if you're some of your areas maybe has sewer lines or gas lines, man, those places are really killer places to hunt because if they maintain them whatsoever, there's going to be green grass and that's going to be a draw. So if you're hunting pines, there's no food, and you can find where they have a sewer line or a gas line or a power line, and you travel that, you're going to find deer. So you guys take care, and deer season is not over yet, but it's winding down, guys. I'm just going to give a few pointers on what I'm seeing and let you guys know that you can always ask any type of questions on this channel. I'm not here for the hunter that knows everything about hunting. I'm here for guys that are learning. Uh, even guys that do know everything that there is to know. I mean, I don't think you'll ever know everything there is, but as long as we give each other ideas, I think it makes all of us great hunters. And I just wanted to share a few tips with you guys, what I've been doing later in the season, especially since we've lost all of our cover. The leaves are gone. Everything on the ground is pretty much gone. And, the bedding has moved. But once again, let's check your power lines, gas lines, sewer lines. Follow your lakes on the bank. You're going to find some rub activity. You're going to find deer trails. Follow your creek banks and any other thing that creates any type of edge. It doesn't have to be a giant edge to where there's a giant wall of thickness. It could be just a small edge, just something very small, as much as a patch of sawbriars could hold a deer this time of year. And could be a big buck, could be a doe, but you guys check those power lines and everything out that like we talked about. You guys take care. Have a happy Christmas and a great New Year. And that's about all I wanted to talk about today. Take care. We'll catch you on the next one. See you guys.